The Not So Dead, Essie story. Written by Isaiyan Morrison. Essie hated their temporary home, but it was the best place she could find on such a short notice. It was an old and dilapidated farmhouse with a balloon frame. There was a large hole in the roof that appeared to increase with each rainstorm. It smelled like old manure and wet hay. The place had sat empty for quite a while, and vandalism had taken its toll. To say their home needed major work was an understatement. Essie stood in the doorway to Dusk and Salome's room. Her hazelnut eyes trained on them as they discussed the new wraith they had tracked to Austin. Salome paced the room. She tossed her inky black hair behind her and questioned Dusk about welcoming the girl into the family. Who is she? Her smoky gray eyes darkened at the thought of taking in another stray. Essie knew she longed for a place they could call their permanent home, and had become frustrated with Dusk's desire to save any lone wraith he came across at the expense of her desire. "I don't know her name yet," he replied. "Are you sure she's really one of us or not?" she questioned. Essie sensed Salome's growing frustration with her significant other. "Are you saying that we shouldn't help her?" "No." She stopped pacing and folded her arms. "I just wish we could stop moving around. I want a permanent home, Dusk. She needs our help. She's new and has no idea what she is or how to live as a wraith. We must find her." Dusk had long since learned how to deal with her various states of mind. "Come here." Salome sighed and walked into his outstretched arms. "I'm just tired of sleeping in different and unfamiliar places." "I know." Dusk nodded as he stroked her hair. "That is my wish, for you and the family." "What about my wish?" Essie thought to herself. "What about what I want?" Dusk knew exactly what she desired, and he avoided addressing it like the plague. There was only one thing she wanted from him at that moment. As a human, she felt like an outsider. She wasn't one of them, even though Dusk considered her to be just like Tristan and Maddie. But Tristan and Maddie didn't scour around the country for small and unsuspecting towns to call home. That responsibility fell on Essie's shoulders, and the weight of it was starting to become more than she could handle. But as a wraith, there wasn't anything she couldn't do. His eyes turned to Essie. "How is the search going for our next home? Once we have safely retrieved this new wraith, we will need to move out." Essie, glad to finally have been noticed, cleared her throat. "There is a small town in Oregon called Haven. I was able to secure a property at a fraction of the price we usually pay. It should be ready within a few days." Dusk shot her a warm smile. "Did you hear what Essie said?" He spoke to Salome. "Haven sounds like an interesting name for a town." "Dusk, I was wondering if I could speak with you alone," Essie said. "Can it wait after we find this wraith?" "You said we would talk the day after we got here. That was a few days ago." "Yes, I know, but now isn't the right time," he replied. "After we find this wraith, I give you my word." The sympathetic look on Salome's face said it all. Dusk possessed a one-track mind. Whatever his current obsession, he gave it his full and undivided attention, and lately, every little thing seemed to fall in that category, except for what she wanted. He never had time for her. "Okay." Essie turned on her heel, her ebony dreadlocks whipping behind her, and she made her way to the farmhouse exit. It was always the same thing with him. All I am is some stupid human servant to him, she thought. I mean, that has to be it. That's the only reason he decided to take me in. She turned the corner and bumped into Tristan. It was almost a common daily occurrence, yet this time, seeing him shirtless improved her mood slightly. Her eyes moved from the healed bullet wound on his chest, then to his face, and his eyes seemed to glow from underneath the brim of his black cowboy hat. "Where's Dusk sending you off to now?" He gently pushed a stray dreadlock back over her right shoulder. "House hunting." "Yeah, I bet we're out of here once he finds that new wraith he's been looking for." He gave her a sideways smile. "That's all he's ever talking about now. Have to admit, It's a little annoying. Well, you know how Dusk is when it comes to orphan wraiths, he replied. He did the same thing for me and Maddie. He did the same thing for you. Orphan wraiths, Essie spoke slowly. I'm not an orphan wraith. Orphan, yes. Wraith, not yet. She rolled her eyes. It was typical of Tristan to flirt with her. He laid it on super thick. While, it's always a pleasure to see you, Tristan. You're blocking the door. Oh, am I? He smirked at her, eliciting a similar response. Yes, you are. He rubbed his hand alongside her right arm. I could come along if you want some company. She felt a sudden pull toward him, and immediately she knew exactly why. When Dusk first welcomed her into the family, he set down one rule that Salome, Tristan, and Maddie had to follow. Wraiths survived by feeding, or what they called leeching, from humans and animals. By using their hands, they were able to draw the very essence from a body into their own, to replenish them. They were never to leech from Essie unless she wanted them to, and she never wanted them to. She stumbled back from him, having recognized that he had just broken Dusk's rule, and in her attempt to escape, she fell to the ground. Essie, I'm sorry! Tristan immediately went to her side. It was an accident. He attempted to help her to her feet, but she pushed him away. Really? She stood up. Sometimes I just lose control. He smiled sheepishly at her. My bad. Sometimes? This happens at least twice a week. You're over 100 years old, Tristan. You should have control over that by now. I may be human, but I'm not a free meal you can tap into whenever you feel like it. She shoulder-checked him as she stormed toward the exit. This would never happen if I was a wraith. He would never be able to do that to me. None of them would. Now outside, she made her way across the property and to the main road. Lost in her own thoughts, she didn't see Maddie, who sat cross-legged underneath a huge oak tree at the edge of the property. He fed from you again, didn't he? Essie halted at Maddie's voice. What was his excuse this time? She grinned. Essie looked to the clear, dark sky above. If I were you, I'd leave this hellhole. And why is that? She knew that Maddie detested being part of the Wraith family. She didn't care for Dusk's rules and found them too constraining for her particular lifestyle. You already know why. I'm tired of the whole family thing. You want to do what you what? I get it. Not only that, but Dusk always feels that he has to bring every stray wraith he finds into the fold, like he's a savior for our kind. And then, there's you. She stood to her feet and brushed the dirt from her pants. A human who will never have the same rules that we wraiths have. Maybe that's what I want. You? A wraith? She approached her. Remember what I told you when we first met? I remember the part where you said you were going to eat me. No, not that. Right after Dusk swooped in and saved you from me. You told me I was better off on the street begging for change than being part of this family. And I also told you that you would never be one of us, but you didn't listen. You thought Dusk would actually turn you. She shrugged. Now look at you. Tristan leeches from you like you're his own personal feeding bag. Dusk orders you to do this and that, and for free, I might add. Salome doesn't say a word about how you're treated, and me, and you. I still hate you. Her stormy brown eyes narrowed. The feeling is mutual, but I know a girl's desire when I see one, she added. You do know that any wraith can turn you? All it would take is for one to drain you dry. Tristan could have done it back there just now, if you didn't shit your pants. Essie shoved her hands in her pockets. I could do it right now. Maddie smirked. Do you want me to turn you? Essie paused in thought. Maddie was right. Any one of them could turn her. Not just Dusk, but he was the oldest and the strongest. She didn't want any run-of-the-mill wraith to give her what she desired. It had to be him. Maddie tilted her head back and laughed. I would never turn someone like you. She spun around. God, you're so desperate. She headed back to the farmhouse. Essie walked aimlessly down the street with no specific destination in mind. She needed to get away from all of them. She needed time to think. Although Dusk wanted her to look more into Haven, she just couldn't find it in herself to care about what he wanted. She started to think about her real father who raised her and her mother who died when she was young. Essie didn't remember her much, and the vague memories she had of her faded with time. What she did remember was how her death broke her father. He drowned his sorrows in bourbon, and after a few years, he changed into a savage beast. His behavior spiraled downwards, and after every drunken stupor, he apologized to Essie and promised to be a better father. But he never did. As she grew older, she spent less time at home and more time on the streets. It was the only way to avoid his verbal and sometimes physical abuse. She gravitated toward the local bars and clubs to ease her pain. Listening to the music made her feel safe. Sometimes she imagined herself up on stage, playing guitar and afterwards, drinking with the local patrons who commented on her superb guitar playing skills. Her dreams were nothing more than that, and eventually she stopped going home. Staying on the streets and sleeping in homeless shelters turned into the better alternative. Begging for change was better than taking a slap to the face. Then one day, she came across a girl. At first, she looked like an easy target to pickpocket. The girl was alone and distraught, and when Essie moved in to swipe whatever cash the girl had in her pocket, the girl, Maddie, turned and attacked her. It was her first time coming across a wraith. People like Maddie didn't exist, but when Essie saw Maddie's eyes glow a fiery red, she took off down the street only to bump into Dusk. He protected her. He made her feel safe. When he wrapped his arms around her and whispered that everything was going to be fine, she believed it. He gave his word. That's when her new life began and her old life ended. Essie grunted at her thoughts, which were soon interrupted by the sound of thumping bass and guitar riffs. She took in her surroundings and realized that she had walked into the commercial part of Austin, Texas. There were several clubs and bars on the street. The sidewalks teemed with people, out enjoying the pleasures that the city had to offer. On her right, she heard more music from a bar, and she crossed the street. Through the window she saw a man on stage, playing an acoustic set. "A music aficionado, I see." A man's deep voice spoke behind her. Essie turned around to see a man dressed in faded blue jeans, combat boots, and a black shirt. "I love music, especially guitar." She trailed off, noticing that his wavy silver hair cascaded down his back. The tips of his fingers were dark as if they had been dipped in black paint. "Acoustic or electric?" he asked. She turned back to the bar. "I like both." She noticed his faint reflection in the window, standing closely behind her. "I do as well." She turned and headed down the street, walking at a brisk pace. "Essie!" the man called after her. She stopped and looked over her shoulder. "How do you know my name?" "Don't be alarmed." He placed his hand on his chest. "My name is Niamh. I believe you and I have a friend in common." His eyes glowed red. "Dusk," Niamh smiled. "Dusk said that there was another wraith who's responsible for the attacks in Austin. That's you, I take it?" "Yes." "And what? You're going to attack me now?" Part of her wanted him to say yes, regardless of his true intentions. That way she didn't have to wait for Dusk to turn her, to make her into one of them. But the other half remained cautious. She knew nothing about him, but it seemed he knew everything about her. "Why would I do that? We're practically family, you and I." She continued to glare at him. "I am his sire." "He never mentioned you before." "Yes. Well, he and I had a little disagreement a few years back," he replied. "He didn't like how I ran things, just like you don't like how he runs things." She wondered why he told his story so freely. "What do you want?" "Just a favor from you." He stepped forward. "Something small?" I don't do favors for people I don't know. You want to be one of us, don't you? He asked her with a prominent smirk. Her eyes billowed. See, I know you, he continued. I know what you really want. I could turn you if I do this favor for you, right? He nodded. Why would you do that for me? As I said before, we're family. It was too good to be true. I make good on my promises, Essie. I reward those who do favors for me. She stared into his eyes. Okay, I'll bite. What is this little favor? I know that Dusk has tasked you with finding places for the family to stay as they wander the country, picking up strays here and there. I also know he has already asked you to find a new home. Yeah, I found one, a town called Haven. You will tell him that you found a better one. Confused, she tilted her head. You just want me to tell him that? Yes, Niamh replied. The town is called Human, and it's located right here in Texas. The home is just a few miles outside of the town. It's secluded. What's in Human? She asked, curious. There is an item of sorts that belongs to me. I've been searching centuries for it. And you want Dusk and the others to help you look for it there? No, a human has it, and I need another wraith to force that human out into the open. His explanation started to sound sketchy to Essie. You're a wraith and you can't do it yourself? Why Dusk? Is he special? He can't be older than you because you just told me you sired him. Do this for me and I will give you what you want, he replied, avoiding her question. As a wraith, there will be nothing and no one, not even Dusk, who will be able to hold you back from what you want to do. No longer will you be used by them as their lackey. You will be strong and immortal. You won't have to bow down to no one. Not even you. She placed her hands on her hips. He copied her movement. Not even me. She stared off over Niamh's shoulder and weighed her options. While she appreciated all that Dusk did for her, she knew that he wasn't going to turn her into a wraith anytime soon. She started to dream about how different her life would be if she accepted Niamh's offer. There was also the possibility that he would go back on his word. She decided it was worth the risk. I'll do it, but I have one condition. Yes? I don't want anyone to die. Not Dusk, Salome, Tristan, Maddie, no one. I don't want that for them. That will be up to you. What? All I need from you is to get them to Human. Whatever happens after that is entirely up to you and fate. I guess. So how are we going to communicate? You have a phone or something? I'll be in touch. He turned to face the street. It was really nice to finally meet you. Before he walked away, he spoke again. I almost forgot. Her name is Faye. Who? The wraith who Dusk is looking for. Her name is Faye. You can take that information back to him, but do not tell him I was here. For this to work, you can't tell him. He walked across the street and soon he disappeared from her view. Essie had been gone several hours. She wondered if her so-called family noticed her absence, and when she walked into the farmhouse, the first person to greet her was Maddie. Oh, you decided to come back, she teased. Didn't think you would. Essie didn't bother to look or acknowledge her. Instead, she continued on, treading carefully on the rotted floorboards, to Dusk's room. He isn't there, Maddie added. He, Tristan, and Salome went to retrieve the baby wraith. Should be back any minute now. Essie stopped and sighed. We're the only ones here. She turned back. I'll be outside. Maddie moved quickly, and within seconds, she stood only inches from Essie. Her nostrils flared, and she moved her head from left to right. You smell like a wraith. Essie swallowed hard. You're probably just smelling yourself, Maddie. No, I know what I smell like. I know what everyone else smells like. This is new. Both girls were startled out of their thoughts by the creaking of the front door opening. Dusk entered, followed by Salome and Tristan. Behind them, Essie saw the new wraith, a young Asian female with shoulder-length black hair. Her eyes shifted quickly and nervously from left to right. Maddie leaned against the wall and spat on the ground. Essie continued toward Dusk's room, her ears honed in on the conversation in the other room. "Where'd you find this one?" Maddie asked. "That's Maddie," Tristan said. "Don't mind her. She's a real but—" "Shut up, Tristan." "Maddie, she is one of us now," Salome spoke. "Be kind to her. She's new and we all know what that's like." Essie entered the room and stood by the window when Dusk entered. "Do you have news on the house in Oregon?" he asked. He didn't greet her. He didn't even ask where she'd been tonight. Essie balled up her fist, holding in her anger. "Yeah," she lied, "but it isn't ready." "Isn't ready?" he asked, confused. "Earlier, you told me it was." "I thought it was, but it's not," she replied. "But don't worry. I found another one that's ready right now. It's right here in Texas, in a town called Human." Dusk pondered. "We can't stay here in this state because of Faye. Not right now anyway. I'm sorry, but we don't have a choice. Dusk, the town is small. The home is a few miles outside of the town. The home is secluded. It's perfect. Believe me." Eventually he nodded. "So it's ready now?" "Yes." She forced a smile on her face. "Tell the owner that we'll take it, but we won't be there for a few weeks." "Why a few weeks?" "So everything can settle down with Faye." Essie narrowed her sight. It wasn't what Niamh wanted, for that moment, and she feared their agreement was at risk. "But we will eventually go there," he added. "Thank you, Essie. Now, I have to get back to Faye. She's scared and she might need to leech." Essie knew exactly what that meant. After all, she was their personal food supply. "It's fine." He turned and left the room. Niamh's plan was in motion. Now there was no turning back. He returned with Salome and the new wraith. "Essie, this is Faye." Essie forced a smile on her face and looked over her shoulder. "I can tell that you're wondering why I smell good. I'm human." "Essie is our friend, and the only human we can trust. She helps us find safe places for us to stay. Have a seat, Faye," Dusk said. Maddie appeared and stood in the doorway. "We're your family now," she said in a snarky tone to Faye. "Welcome to our little merry band of nomads." "You'll get used to this life," Salome added, "but you will need to leech." Dusk's eyes moved to Essie, and she knew that he was going to give her another task, and she was expected to do it. She played along and approached her. "Relax, Faye." She held out her arm. "All you have to do is touch my skin, lightly, and allow my essence to flow into you.